Hello, welcome back. It's been a little while since the last video and even longer since the last dev vlog, but I've got a juicy one today. I started this bit of work in late May and then a combination of things happened. My day job got really busy to the point where we were working overtime on weekends, which does not happen very often. I also got into the development of a VTuber and custom VTuber app with Twitch integration and Stream Deck integration. So I spent a lot of time working on that, but it is done now, at least mostly done. So that's good to go. I'll probably talk about that in a future video. But then to top things off, I got super addicted to V Rising to the point where I played over 100 hours in just like 2 weeks. I've slowed down a little bit, but it's got me really bad, and now I'm still playing a bit. I'm trying to do a solo brutal run, but I'm having some trouble. I don't think I can quite hack it. That's not the point though. We're here today to talk about my game. By the way, I'm Savalian. I make videos about games, development, and creativity. I've been working on this cute little fishing game in Godot since late last year. And a little recap of what I've done so far. I've got the entire fishing system done. I have a way to create new fish with different shapes, colors, patterns. You can play a little rhythm minigame to actually catch the fish. The fishing nodes spawn in fish based on rarity. It's recorded in a fish dex so you can catch them all. I don't know if I covered this bit in a previous video or not, but I also have a very simple inventory system, so your fishes go into your inventory when you catch them. And all of this happens on a procedurally generated island. And the goal for the next chunk of development was to start on the idea of fishing runs. So I am playing a little loose with the design for this game to make things more fun for me, developing it, and also to prevent the vision from getting too rigid. I'm kind of designing things as I go, which I know can be risky, but I knew I wanted the fishing process to be kind of roguelite-ish. I wanted the player to be able to progress through different islands that are randomly generated, slowly getting more advanced, and I'm still figuring out what exactly that means for it to be harder or more advanced or whatever. I'm kind of feeling my way through it. But that was the goal, was to develop this roguelite-ish system where the player can advance through like a series of islands with some structure to it. The very first thing I did actually was update the visuals of my land pieces a little bit. Since I'll be working with these pieces to create different island types, I wanted to make sure I liked them. So I removed the water part of the mesh, so now we just have the water plane with the shader on it. We don't have like a separate mesh for water. It was just making like an extra layer below the water surface, which didn't make any sense. I also tweaked some of the color gradients and made sure I had a good selection of colors for different biomes, so to speak. I am still using the UV sliding method that I like to use here, except instead of editing the UVs themselves, I'm doing it in a shader. After getting that very helpful comment on my fish generation video, I've started to use this more often, and it's great. It's so much easier. I wish I had thought harder about this earlier and done this earlier. I wanted to make sure I could make the islands look different, and also later they'll have different fish, but I wanted them to be identifiable as certain biomes. So I made some trees and bushes and things. Sorry, Smokey. I was going to make these on a little dev stream so you could be there, but I ended up just being too busy and too tired. So I made a small set of trees. Maybe we'll get some more later and we can stream those ones. The island types I have assets for right now are two that I'm calling Autumn. One is like a pinkish orange and one is just a regular orange. A Lush Island, which is kind of the default green color. Plains, which is yellow, kind of sparse. Swamp is the last one, which is like a blue-green, has a lot of twisty trees. These are the themes that I've gone with for now, and then I do have some more colors. I can make some more tree assets, and we can get some more islands in later. After making the new island assets, I had to actually work them into my island generation code. So the first thing I did was adapt the island generation so it actually takes in some parameters. Before, it was very much a prototype. It just generated with the same hard-coded parameters each time. So I made the width and height configurable, and then I created an island type resource that saves things like the visual theme, the size, and then which specific decoration objects can be added to the scene, and then also like how much decoration there should be, how many fishing nodes there should be, things like that. It took me a while to think through how exactly I wanted to add the trees and such to the islands, because I'm generating them procedurally and I wasn't really sure if it would be easier to like detect where the ground was and just place things randomly, or do something else. In the end, I decided to use the same kind of system that I use for the fishing nodes, which is that each land piece has points on it defined where a fishing node can be added. So I added those manually, but then they can just be grabbed by the procedural code and they can add stuff there. So I've added, in addition to points for fishing nodes, I've added points for decor objects, interaction objects, and also shore decor objects. I don't actually have anything for this last one, but I was thinking like rocks, cattails, maybe some mangrove trees, anything that would go on like the edge of the land where it meets the water, I could add as a shore decor object. So this is kind of future, thinking ahead a little bit. Maybe I won't actually use this and I'll just take them out later, but I have the option now if I want to add stuff like that in. I also have a couple of interaction objects planned. The first one is the teleporter, which we need to get to the next island. And the other one, I haven't actually added it into the game in this video, but it's a shrine where you can give up some of the fish that you've caught on your run to regenerate your mana. So the way that the island generation works now is that when I'm instantiating all the land pieces, I set their theme, I grab all the fishing node points, the decor points, etc. from each one, and then once the island is built, I go through and I randomly assign things to those points based on the density defined in the island type resource. So for example, the swamp has a higher decoration density because I want it to have a lot of trees, and the plains has a much lower density because I want it to be kind of open and sparse. I also added what is essentially a fill algorithm to figure out which land pieces are connected to the player's starting position, so that I can only put fishing nodes and interactable objects on those land pieces. And this is basically just so I don't need to figure out bridges or disconnected land pieces, because I'm new to a lot of this procedural generation stuff and I'm not really sure what the most graceful way is to handle that. So we're just going easy, we're making it work. Theoretically, if I did this right, it should never spawn a teleporter somewhere where the player can't reach. And with that, I have randomly generated islands with different biomes or themes, and each one gets a teleporter, so that later you can advance to the next island. With that in place, I took a big long break to play V Rising for a month, and I just came back earlier this week. Next, I had to figure out the structure of the fishing runs themselves. I was envisioning something like Cult of the Lamb or Curse of the Dead Gods, where when you start a run you have this sort of map of options, and then as you progress through those nodes you can choose which room you want to go to next, or which island in my case. You can't go back to where you were before, so you can only sort of go forward. So the player has to decide what sorts of things are more important to them. Right now all the islands are roughly the same, but in the future they'll have different kinds of fish, and then there will also be more island types that you can get certain things at, like the mana regen that I mentioned. I'm also thinking about doing like blueprints for building at certain islands. We'll see what we can come up with there. And I also need to make sure that islands later in the run have better stuff at them, so they're worth getting to. So right now I've introduced this concept of like a difficulty number that gets bigger further into the run. I'm not using it for anything right now, but I'll get to that later, and I'll use it to sort of ramp up the value of the fish, most likely. And I ended up with a system that basically works like this. So into my run generation, I pass in the number of levels that I want, so the number of like islands that they can advance through, and then the number of options that any one island can have. So when you get to the teleporter, how many options can you have? And then I have the starting and ending like difficulty numbers. Again, they don't really do anything right now, but they will in the future. So I randomly select the first island type, determine how many options it will have, and add a node for each option. And I loop through like this through all the levels that we want. Each node gets, between 1 and whatever number of options. And then I advance to the next level. All of those options get options. And we'll keep these fairly small so I'm not like exponentially growing my tree here. But at the end, all the options lead back to just one final node. And I would like to do something like a boss fight for this last node. I'm not really sure what that looks like, but that's kind of an idea that I have, is that there's like something at the end that feels very final. It's difficult to get through, but if you do get through it, you've like won the run, and you get some sort of extra reward is what I'm thinking. I use a node connections dictionary to keep track of the map here, where the key of each item is the node, and then the value is a list of all the nodes it connects to. So I can just go in, I can say I'm on island 1 in this list, and then I can get this island connects to islands 2 and 3, for example. So that way, when I'm advancing, I can grab those options, show them to the player, and then figure out which node that they are going to jump to next. With all of that working, I just have to hook up all the rest of it. So I'm generating the run, but I'm not actually doing anything with it yet. And before I could actually properly implement it, I had to make the teleporters actually do something. So I've had the 3D model, I put it in the game, but I still have to make it work. And this code got a little messy for me. There's a lot of events in here being subscribed to and listened to through. There's like a little chain of events, which I don't really like. So I'm going to probably go in and refactor this. But the basic way this works is that the teleporter object is an interactable object. It's a script I've created where it has just like an interact function. And then it also has code to determine when another object has entered its collision sphere. So it has the area 3D, the collision shape 3D, and whenever something enters or exits this collision area, it knows about it, and it tells the interaction manager, which I made for the fishing nodes, which work largely the same way, and it basically adds itself to the interaction manager as like, hey, someone's nearby. And then when the player presses the interact button, it takes all the registered objects and figures out which one the player should interact with. From there, I added a C# event to the teleporter script so that when the island generation creates this teleporter, it listens to that event, and when it fires, it activates the next island code basically in the fishing run. So that's the quick version. The code definitely needs some finagling, so I'm not going to look at it too closely here. I need to rework how I'm doing a lot of this to make it a little bit less messy, but it does work, and that's the most important thing. With that, the last piece is to figure out which island the player wants to go to next out of the available options. I made just a very quick UI here. It's all placeholder UI. It's very ugly, but basically it adds each option to a list. Right now it just displays the name of the island's theme and the difficulty number that was assigned. I would love for this whole element to be clickable, but I couldn't actually figure out how to do that. I tried to override the GUI input, but for some reason, and I'm sure I was doing something wrong, it only worked when the mouse wheel was scrolled. It didn't work with clicks. So I'm going to figure that out later. For now, there's just a little button on here. When the player clicks the button, it signals to the fishing run object that we've made our selection, and then it just calls into the island generation code to regenerate the island with these new parameters. And that's the whole system working from start to finish. We could start up the game, find the teleporter, advance to the next island. At any point, we can stop and go fishing if we want to, and we probably should if we want to get any points. Eventually, we do reach the end, and there's currently no end point. If you get to the last island, there's just no more options, which brings us to the next feature that I'll be working on, hopefully in a future video, the home island. So the vision for this game is that the player will have a home island where they can build a shop. And that's what the fish are for, to sell in the shop. So we're getting there. Slowly but surely we're getting there. I'm going to be starting on figuring out what the home island's going to look like, whether I want there to be any like procedural generation in that. Maybe like an Animal Crossing thing where the player at the beginning of the game gets to like pick the island that they want to make their home. Maybe it's got some like ponds or something. I don't know. But I'm going to start thinking about that. Get maybe some simple building in. That might be next. And then also create this sort of, start and end of the run where you can like sort of cash out, see your progress, your results at the end, and then return home with all your fishes. So that's the plan. If you want to see what's coming up next, don't forget to subscribe. And I will mention I'm expecting I'm going to have another slow month coming up for YouTube because my work schedule is going to remain extremely hectic in the next month. I may also have to travel for a week for work, which I really don't want to do. If I can do it remotely, I'm going to do that for sure, but it might not be up to me. So we've got some maybe slow weeks coming up, and I'm sorry, I'll do my best to get some videos out for you. But either way, whether it's sooner or later, if you subscribe, you'll be able to see my next video whenever it shows up. Hopefully soon. So thank you so much for watching. I'll be back as soon as I can with another video, and I hope to see you there. Bye bye!